Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm your guest host, Christina Long, filling in for Matt Jones on the desk today. He will be back tomorrow to host, and he'll join us by phone later on the show to talk about last night's baseball win over Pine Bluff, as well as this weekend's series against Texas A&M. We also have Ethan Westerman in the studio today to talk all things transfer portal in terms of football. The portal window opens today, and also men's basketball getting a couple of big commits out of the transfer portal yesterday. All of that is coming on the show. We have a pretty full one here on this Wednesday, but first, a word from Kendall King.
Proud of over 4 decades of design. We're continuing the legacy of great creative design by combining our brands of Kendall King, Soapbox, and Shopcart. Together, these brands represent a new focus in marketing design, with individual attention to specific areas. Through our design expertise supported by a team of talented professionals, we showcase our best. We are Kendall King, we are Soapbox, we are Shopcart, we are design.
Welcome back. We're going to start our discussion today with some football transfer portal news. The first entry is already in. Came in as we were getting ready to come into the studio today with Quentin Murphy entering the transfer portal. I don't remember last year if they had an early enrollee go in the portal this soon. I remember, you'll see some young guys and you'll see some guys that are lower on the depth chart, but I don't remember a guy recently who, for Arkansas anyway, who has enrolled early and then by April been in the portal. And that's the case for Quentin Murphy, a Parkview, former 3-star out of Parkview in Little Rock. And he was a quarterback in high school, right? I know you've talked to his coaches for our recruiting magazine. He was a quarterback, but he was here as a wide receiver, was recruited as an athlete, right?
Yeah, it's more like what was he not? Because he was, like I said, played some quarterback in high school, was listed on the roster as a defensive back, and then reported today as an Arkansas wide receiver. So you're like, all right, he's something.
Right.
He can play a lot of spots, but yeah, he's the first one to go in the portal. And it's very rare to see, I feel like, an early enrollee freshman who just got here. It's like had enough time to maybe take a couple classes, eat a couple meals, and then you're out. But and all those, anytime that there's an early enrollee who transfers out, like I knew somebody who in basketball did it, and it's just, you can never assume that it's, one size fits all of like why they're in the portal. Sometimes it can be staff-induced where they're asking, it can be player-induced to where they're wanting something else. They didn't like what they had, for their short time here. So you just never know. All I know is that he is the first domino. I wouldn't have, if you're asking me to predict, yesterday who the first domino would be, I don't think Quentin Murphy would have been on my list. Just right. Because it's a very random first guy. But,
and the early enrollee of it all is different. You'll see guys that transfer, like Danny Saili at BYU is an example. He transferred in, did spring ball, and then left BYU right away. You see that sometimes, but I feel like it's rare to see an early enrollee, and I don't remember it happening for Arkansas in a while. He might not be the last one we see. They have a bunch of early enrollees. They do have to kind of cut down some of their numbers. But Pittman was saying yesterday when we spoke with him at the press conference that he's not expecting to lose any first or second team guys. Now, he did note you never know what's going on behind closed doors. He doesn't always, any coach in the country, as we've seen at Tennessee, you don't always know who's in their ear or whose ear they are in. Yeah. But so he did note that, but he said that as far as the guys that they expect to enter, it's all guys that are either not really on the depth chart or are lower down. So that's kind of his expectation. He talked about wanting to add about 5 defensive guys. Defense is the top priority. They just, you wrote a good note on the site the other day about how when we are at practice and you look at the red jerseys versus the white jerseys, the numbers are very obviously different, and they just have more bodies on offense than they do on defense. It's not even necessarily about talent or skill depth-wise. It's about literally having the bodies to play defense.
Yeah, and I think you feel it. A guy like Cam Ball, who hasn't been available all spring because he's recovering from like elbow surgery, they just don't have like the same dudes that you're expecting, in the fall. And just already, I think there's more offensive numbers than defensive, and then just who's been available for practice for whatever reason. There's just been a lot more offensive guys, and it's one of those deals where they're trying out different fronts. Like they were playing a 3-3-5 base defense, and half of it was like, yeah, this is good to work on something like this. The other half of it was like, do you really even have enough guys to go 3 teams right now without doing it this way just based on personnel? It's like they're having to try out a lot of different things right now. I do like what Travis Williams said about right now this spring, their situation is these are the guys we have. We're going to coach who we have. Like we can't do anything about it right now. But it is one of those deals where without a doubt, just going to a single practice, like that's where they got to start in the portal. I wouldn't surprise me if they maybe plug a hole or two on offense, like maybe add a bigger body receiver or something, like maybe, but it's without a doubt, like there's not a position spared on the defense. Like even linebacker that you're feeling good about, you probably want to add another guy for depth. It's just, you're going to have to, that's where I would anticipate you're going to see most of the action.
Right, and Pittman had mentioned that about, getting kind of a veteran linebacker in there because behind that, those first couple guys, they don't have a ton of experience, trying to get somebody with a little more experience. Mm-hmm. If the money allows and if they have the numbers for it, the numbers to do it, because it seems like safety and defensive line, the secondary as a whole, but especially safety and defensive line are kind of the priorities that they need depth. And I think part of that is, some of the injury stuff that's been going on, but also in terms of just sheer numbers is what they're going for. And so, he did say he said, I'm not going to say we're not going to take an offensive transfer because if a good deal comes up, or if they lose somebody, he doesn't want to, but if they lose somebody that they weren't expecting to lose, then you've got to plug that hole. So they've been, I think they've been looking at some offensive guys. They probably have some bookmarked as, okay, if we need it, this is a guy we like. And Pittman gave kind of some interesting insight into their process. And he had mentioned in some of his press conferences throughout spring about, I think it was a few weeks ago, he was like, I'm about to go look at some tape on some transfer guys here in a little bit. Because that's one thing I think that I didn't really think about is the fact that, okay, there's rules about when you can contact players and when, kind of negotiations can happen, I think, but there's not rule, if you see a tweet that so-and-so is planning to enter the portal, because that happens all the time, the portal's not open, but you'll see guys that are going in, you can go watch tape, you can go ask other coaches about him and what they know about him, and you can go try and evaluate, okay, when the portal opens, if we see this guy's name, yes, we want to go after him. And that was something that they've been working on for a while. And he was saying yesterday he looked at 8 more. And so it sounds like, and tell me if it was a little hard to understand, but tell me if you kind of if you had the same impression I did about how this process is working for them. So they get some guys, they compile kind of a list of guys that they're maybe interested in that they expect to see in the portal. And they basically rank them based on how much they think it's going to cost to get them and the priority they think they need them, I guess. That was how I understood what he was saying.
Yeah, that's what I got too. I mean, he even talked about like re-ranking guys. Like you have to, it's probably an ongoing cycle. And something that stood out to me yesterday is he mentioned at least once, I think maybe twice, he just kept on saying how far the money stretches. And that's just something that I think is just more and more prevalent, is it's like yes, maybe player A, number one priority, but the money is going to stretch too far to where you don't have enough money for guy B, C, D, who collectively it's more important to have than player A. It's just having to do that math pretty much, it seems like. It is one of those deals now. Matt and I talked about it a little bit yesterday. It just is like maybe more than ever important how much you're vetting the guys that you're wanting to come in. That's what you talk about, the re-ranking and watching film and all this. It's just who you're bringing in your program now there's dollar signs attached, and more than ever right now, like you see the situation at Tennessee with Nico Iamaleava, where it's like, are you bringing in a guy that you think is going to, I'm not saying Nico Iamaleava is the problem or something, but there's surely guys in his ear telling him go make more money, do whatever. I mean, it's all fair game now, but it's like, are you bringing in guys that you sense in the future are going to maybe create more problem than help for your program? It's just a big vetting process, I think, right now. And it's like, maybe you love the tape on this guy, but then you get to talk to him and you realize, hey, this might be a guy who's not a good culture fit. He's a guy who's going to maybe create some problems, but I can get this other guy who's maybe not as talented, isn't going to create as many problems. And it's just a big, I think more than ever, vetting process of who do you want to bring in your program. It's
that same philosophy that Pittman talked about at the end of last season when we were all freaking out about all the guys that were leaving. And he was saying, yes, it hurts to lose somebody like a Luke has, or there's all these players that were significant contributors that we're losing. But he was saying it's not necessarily that we can't pay them. It's more that they want more than we think they are worth, kind of. And more so that rather than taking the philosophy, I will spend a large pot of money on a few guys, they're saying, let's make our money go farther, basically. I can buy one expensive scarf. I don't know why I chose a scarf. I don't even wear scarves. I can buy one really expensive designer scarf, or I can take that same amount of money and buy a few different pieces of clothing that I really like, you know,
Yeah.
to use a little shopping example, I guess. So, you know, and that's my dollar's going to go farther. I'm getting more out of that. And that's kind of the philosophy they're taking, which I think is a smart approach for a school like Arkansas. I think, you know, with some of there's been a lot of talk about whether they have enough NIL to compete, things like that. It's changing with revenue share. Everybody's supposed to be more equal, but they won't be because there's still NIL and there's all this. It's utter chaos. But I think the approach that they're taking is a smart one for them to take. And it's the same one they're taking as far as acquisition. It applied to retention, and now it's applying to acquiring new players.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I don't think Sam did himself any favors last year with the whole blue light special thing, talking about his players.
That was tough.
That just made them seem like a discount bargain, like, you know. But,
Yeah.
like, at the same time, there is some truth to that as far as, like, I like your little shopping analogy with your scarf. If I go to a baseball game and I have a $10 bill and I'm either going to choose the burger that costs $10 or I'm going to get 2 mediocre.
Last night at baseball, you could have gotten 5 $2 hot dogs.
Exactly. Am I going to choose the one burger or the 5 $2 hot dogs that, you know, hot dogs might not be my favorite thing in the world, but hey, they're going to fill me up and collectively they'll do more damage than that one burger. But hey, we're on the analogy train today.
Yeah.
But like it really is like, that's how I think you have to think about it. Is it's like you have your pot of money, say you love your roster you have right now, and you really just do need to plug a few holes. That money will stretch further, and you can probably get more guys that you need. But then there's also, like, the whole part of it now is the retention piece. Like, you have these pieces you might like, and then they're demanding more money, or their agents are demanding more money, or whatever. It's just, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that I am glad that we don't see,
Right.
or whatever, because dollar signs are just, I mean, I can't imagine how many voices are in their ear right now about, like, you never know how many are basically asking for a payday, a pay raise, and then while you're trying to get other guys, and you never probably really know exactly. Like, I'd assume you're probably doing some things out of good faith all the time that this guy isn't going to leave. Then they come back and they're wanting.
Well,
more.
I mean, look at Patrick Kudus.
Yeah.
Supposedly told Pittman, I'm not, you know, you're not going to redshirt me for another school. I want to be here, whatever. And we don't know exactly how the conversations with him and Pittman went. We know kind of what's been reported or what either side has said, but we don't know exactly what conversations looked like. But it looked from the outside like he kind of just threw him under the bus a little bit.
All we know is Pittman said, like, about a month and a half before that, Kudus came in and said, "No, coach, I want to be a Hawk," and that's all that we had heard. So we kind of crossed him off the list of, like, not even a possibility. And then that's what I'm saying. You never know Pittman said it yesterday. You never know what's happening. You know, behind the curtain, behind closed doors, there could be somebody who's you really feel confident about, and then all of a sudden you lose them. It's just today's game, and I feel like you have to almost assume that you're going to lose guys.
And that's what's been so hard about spring football in the transfer portal era, especially covering it and talking about it, and I'm sure for fans consuming it and reading about it, is you don't even know who's going to be on the team in August.
Yep.
And so it's really hard. You know, I was saying this on the radio the other day. You know, I think they were asking me about the defense and how I felt about the defense, and I was like, I cannot right now confidently make any kind of statement about if this defense is going to be good or not, because I don't know who's on it. Because the numbers are lower, because some of the key players have been gone, some of the new transfers that they got in have been hurt and haven't even really gotten to participate yet. I don't know. I can tell you that they've looked pretty good in practice. I can tell you that they've made, you know, especially the secondary has made some great plays. I don't know if the guys making those plays are going to be the ones making plays in the fall. And I think that's really hard for everybody to get their arms around. Media, coaches, players, fans, everybody. Nobody knows what's happening. And so I think that's one thing that's made spring especially really tough is you don't necessarily know that any of it is what it's going to look like in August for fall camp. And, you know, Pittman said yesterday he would love if there was one transfer portal window in January, and that's kind of a proposal that's been floated. He loves the idea of one window, which I also like. And, you know, this is probably going to be changing constantly for the next several years, as it has for the last several years.
Yeah, and it's just tough because, like, any time you think, I feel like it's almost like as soon as you think you figured it out of what a team is going to look like, something changes, and that's just today's era of it. But yeah, no, like, to your point, on the scrimmage Saturday, I walked away, I was like, oh wow, the defense looked pretty good today, but then I had to remind myself, like, hey, well, this is not at all what it might look like in the fall, because they're going to add some guys, and it's like, I walked away from that scrimmage, at least for the day, feeling more confident about the defense than the offense. But then I actually you have to bring yourself back to just what makes sense. I'm like, well, the offense, I think, should be better this year than the defense because it's year 2 under Petrino, and you have Taylor Green coming back, and you have a lot of, pieces to work with. It's just, it's like you cannot take what you see in spring as gold and like this is how it is. It's almost like you have to get more conceptual of like, well, what makes sense? And that's what's so hard is it's like there's more than what meets the eye in the spring is because you aren't even seeing all of it. I mean, number one, the quarterback isn't even getting tackled. They aren't even in full pads. They're not, doing this or that. It's just the spring is for more than anything. I think it's workouts.
And I think it's helping get to know some of the new guys.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the new transfers, you don't expect many. We talked about how it happens, but you don't expect many of the guys they just got in December or, who started spring ball here. You don't expect that many of them, if any, to be leaving by spring ball. It happens. We talked about how they got one that way when Danny Saili. Happens all the time, but it's not necessarily all that common. And so part of it, I think, is getting to know a lot of the new faces. And then basically it's kind of like a tryout for some guys. For some of the young guys, it's, how can I show them in practice, them being the coaches, that I am not somebody that they need to encourage to transfer. And how can I, it's always obviously an audition for playing time, but it's also kind of an audition for being able to stick around, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I also think Bobby Petrino probably does like the spring because it gives him time to work on implementing the
it's
offense.
It's absolutely beneficial.
It's beneficial, but it's not like it's hard to grasp big takeaways. It's more like everybody's just learning. The whole thing is just a big learning curve, and everybody's learning this, learning that. I think quarterbacks are learning big time from Petrino in the spring because he starts to demand more and more of the execution as they go along after they get down to the more mental side of a lot of things. It's just, it's a big learning process, but it's you learn some stuff, but it's hard to make grand takeaways. It's more like evaluating talent. Like, you can go to a spring practice right now and say Madden Iamaleava can really throw the ball. Mm-hmm. That's just a God-given natural ability that this guy has a great arm. What's he going to do whenever there's a fully padded defense in a game? You don't know. You just evaluate, I think, talent right now, and you evaluate maybe camaraderie, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think, you can watch guys change over time, right? Like we've talked about, I keep talking about Danny Saili, but he's a guy that we've seen grow from fall to spring. It's kind of a check-in of guys that were here last year, and then also with some of the new guys. I mean, we've talked about how Omega Blake started the spring okay, and then since spring break has really come on and shown up. And so you see growth in that way, in ways that are beneficial and that are helpful. And that's what practicing is about, right? And so it's certainly beneficial for the team. I think it can be hard, and it's getting harder for people like us and for fans to draw conclusions about what the season is going to look like. Like, I can't say, okay, I saw this in spring, here's how many wins I think they're going to get.
And that's exactly why I'm with Sam pointed to different reasons even, but like that's why I think scrimmaging an outside opponent like Deion Sanders, like it would be just not beneficial for anybody because you're either going to win that and people are going to overreact and think that you're something that you might not be, or you're going to lose it.
And people think you're horrible.
People are going to think you're terrible. It's just like maybe great in theory that you're getting to see somebody other than your first team defense, but let's be real. For these guys with how the portal is now, the first team offense versus first team defense, the first team defense is largely made up of guys who were at Arkansas last year. The first team offense is largely made up of guys who weren't. They're basically seeing a new opponent as is. Like, what is the benefit of all of a sudden going and facing Syracuse?
Yeah, and honestly what it is, the way it would actually, I think if it were to actually happen, and coaches have floated this for a few years now, is, playing basically like your FCS opponent as a spring sort of scrimmage. So say Arkansas, and this is something that Pittman said yesterday, if Arkansas goes and plays UAPB in the spring, and some guy from UAPB balls out against Arkansas, that guy's not staying at UAPB. And then why on earth would UAPB want to play in that game? Or they're all going to get hurt, they're going to get hurt, things like that. Why would they want to do that in spring in a game that doesn't even count?
Exactly. In Arkansas, let's use this example of Arkansas versus UAPB. Say it was a spring game, would go so vanilla in that game.
Oh gosh, they don't show anything.
I mean, they already don't in the first game of the regular season, but they would go so vanilla in that game that you almost wonder, it's like, would UAPB go all out for this? And then all of a sudden Arkansas, like, I don't know, you're just getting a misconception of what a team like could actually look like. And it's also, I mean, there was a guy this year at UAPB, I am blanking on his name, the receiver, who it's like, he popped off this year, and then he's at OU now. Mm-hmm. I'm like, it took him going through an entire season at that level to get that. But yeah, like you said, if you go in a spring game and all of a sudden you're showing out doing that, it's actually the same guy who had the big talk before Arkansas UAPB played and was like, yeah, their DBs are slow.
It's that guy?
Javani Gibson. Yeah, Javani Gibson.
Wow, I can't believe I missed that.
Yeah, former Boll Weevil. That's why I know this.
There you go.
Boll Weevil, UAPB to Oklahoma. Your
Look at that.
Your normal path for a player. But it's a guy like him. Like, it took a whole FCS season for people to see it.
Right.
But you could go in a spring game like that and just ball out, and then UAPB is like, well, great, we just lost our guy who could be our stud this year. It would not be beneficial for them at all.
Yeah. Well, speaking of transfers, I want to switch to basketball because Arkansas obviously gets a couple of really big transfers yesterday. These were things we were expecting to happen, but it was also kind of, I think everybody was holding their breath because you just don't know till you know.
Yep.
It's the same as like coaching cycles. Like you hear the rumors, but there's always a little bit of anxiety of like, until the announcement comes, how do we really know? And so they get Malique Ewin from Florida State, Nick Pringle from South Carolina. These are two guys that, had been kind of expected. I know fans were excited about them. Guys with high-level basketball experience. Anthony Christensen, our men's basketball writer, wrote a couple of stories on wholehogsports.com about talking to a couple of people that covered them at their former schools about kind of what they do and what Arkansas is getting in them. But as far as these two guys, I mean, what does this add for Arkansas? It's obviously a big deal. They need some pieces, but what do these two guys kind of add for them relative to what they have coming back?
You'll normally see this from coaches as soon as the portal opens, all sports. What are the areas that they go and they're addressing? It's usually things that they were deficient in last year. It's just super top of mind of, man, that can't happen again. You look at these two additions and they are 100% that. I mean, Nick Pringle, they're two big inside presences. Nick Pringle is a really good defensive rebounder. He's somebody who, I mean, you think about Arkansas's last two games of the year, St. John's and Texas Tech, and they got crushed on the O glass by the other team. And it's just like, you needed more rebounding. What did they do? They went and got a guy who's established in the SEC, Nick Pringle. Was a part of some really good Alabama teams. Transfers to South Carolina, was good there. South Carolina didn't have a good season, but Nick Pringle, you could see he's a good player. They went and got a guy who's been around in the SEC and who can make an impact on the glass. He can also score some too. I mean, if you think back to Arkansas getting crushed at South Carolina this year, if you want to take your brain to that place where they just looked like the worst team ever. But Nick Pringle scored the first 6 points of that game. I mean, they just fed him, and he was just effortless, dink, 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 scoring. South Carolina's up 6-0. This is a guy who he can be a good offensive presence inside. I don't think he's ever going to fill up this. I mean, he did score 18 against Arkansas that game, so maybe I need to calm down there. But like, that was a high scoring game for him. But he really adds some toughness, some rebounding, those type of things. And then Malique Ewin, what he does, he's an offensive rebounder. He's going to get you extra opportunities. I mean, he, in a game against LSU this year, had a 17 rebound double-double with 11 offensive rebounds. Wow. That's an SEC team that he did that against, someone in LSU that had some size. Malique Ewin's a guy who he's very tall. I think he's 6'11", if I have his height right. Hopefully I do. He's really good for his size at like being mobile. I'm checking this right now.
I was going to say, he's 6'11", 230.
Yeah, I don't want to lie to the people, but I thought he was 6'11".
You're right.
But he's a guy who, for his size, moves really well and can get to the rim and whatnot. But the two things you're looking at with him, I think, are he's a good finisher, offensive rebounds. I mean, his field goal percentage, around 60%, led the ACC this past year. So if you have the ACC's top field goal percentage guy, and then you're adding a guy who can get you a lot of offensive rebounds, that's just a high motor piece that I think really helps fill a spot that Arkansas, quite frankly, missed a lot of last year with their bigs. I kind of view him in a way, maybe not the best comparison. It's almost like a taller, probably beefier, more just like inside presence Trevin Brazile. As far as high motor, Trevin Brazile has a great field goal percentage. Why? Because so many of them are dunks. Like, literally, it's like his shots are dunks or three-pointers. That's Trevin Brazile. Malique Ewin's different than that. But he does have the same type of motor, and he just has a great field goal percentage. And the offensive rebounds are really high. I mean, he had a game against Miami, Florida, where he was 10 for 10. That was the best field goal percentage game for any ACC player last year. He had 9 double-doubles, which were 5th most in the ACC. This is a guy who I think you add him in the picture and is instantly, like, there's no doubt in my mind, instant starter. Like, this, if this guy's not in your starting lineup, I don't know what happened.
Do you feel that way about Pringle, too?
I'm not sure yet on Pringle. I think it really depends on how they want to, if they want 2 bigs in there next year. Like, because I can see Trevin Brazil potentially being a starter, too. This is going to be the big question all offseason moving forward, to be honest, is who's going to, this always happens with basketball. It's literally up until the first game, it's always who's going to be the starters, which is kind of funny because it really does not matter.
And they're probably going to change throughout that early season, throughout the non-conference.
How many starting lineups did Arkansas have this past year?
Oh my gosh.
A lot. It's like, it's just so funny how we put so much emphasis on who is the starting lineup. Arkansas is going to have next year, without a doubt, 2 or 3 guys coming off the bench with NBA potential. Like, that's just how it is. Like, you look at the 2 freshmen they're bringing in, I'd be surprised if one, if not both, are starting. You look at your returning. The portal hasn't officially closed. Expecting returning. The portal hasn't closed yet, but we're pretty late in the ball game. Expecting to return DJ Wagner, Carter Knox, Billy Richmond, Trevin Brazil. Those are 4 guys.
Here's what's going to happen. We've talked about that this morning, and this afternoon they're all going to
watch it happen. If it does, y'all can come for me, but we're very late in the ball game. Those guys, Billy Richmond, like, he's a guy who I think everybody knows at this point they want to see him on the floor because of his effort and stuff. Like, there's guys that will be coming off the bench next year that straight up, I don't care. I mean, they could have an exodus of guys, and you're still going to have guys on the bench probably that have NBA aspirations because John Calipari is your coach. But, I mean, I would anticipate right now, like, Carter Knox is going to have a very prevalent role again. I mean, this is a guy who could sneak into first-round discussions for next year's draft if he hasn't already. I haven't checked the mock drafts recently, but it's really just a matter of what look you're going to go with. But I mean, you don't add people in the portal like Nick Pringle and Malique Ewin if they aren't in your. I mean, Calipari already doesn't really add a lot of guys that aren't going to be in your rotation unless they're like last year where he was like, I'm going to have a 9-man rotation, then just
I need
add
some
random
bodies. Yeah.
I mean, he literally doesn't. If you aren't in his rotation, I'm not sure this is a joke. I'm not sure he knows your name, but kidding. But no, it really is one of those deals where these 2 are going to be in the mix. And I feel a lot better about Arkansas's front court situation for next year with these 2 because you have these 2, Trevin Brazil, and then I am blanking on the name, international guy who's coming in.
Oh, yes. I also don't remember his name.
Ratine, is that?
Yes, I don't know I have no idea how you pronounce it.
But that guy's, I mean, I think he's 6'9". So you have 4 bodies there, which already is more bodies than you had this year. And then I'm very high on Malique Ewin. Like, I mean, this is a guy who I think this could be, I don't know. He could have just a phenomenal year next year. I love the guard play between DJ Wagner, Darius Acuff, Malik Thomas, and then you have your kind of hybrid with Carter Knox and your Billy Richmond. I mean, I just really like how this roster is shaking up. I mean, I bet that they add another maybe like traditional maybe point. I don't even know right now like where you really have to add if they are going to add another. I'm sure they probably will, but yeah, this roster, I've just rambled for a while about it. But I think these were 2 really good additions. It addressed pertinent needs that Arkansas had last year. And all it did was it just made the team tougher, I think. Like, more than anything, like, you look at who's gone, really the only rotation piece that's gone out is Vonimir Ivisic, and he was a forward, but, like, what was his interior game? Like, he blocked shots, and he was more like just a wing. Like, he just shot threes, but you added 2, truly front court players.
Right. Kareem Retail.
I have
no idea how that could be completely wrong on the last name. First name Kareem.
Yeah.
The forward from Lebanon. So a lot going on in the transfer portal. We are tracking all of it on WholeHogSports.com between women's basketball, men's basketball, football. Everything is happening at once. What else is new? But we'll have everything, throughout basketball's off season and also here in the transfer portal window for football over the next 10 days on WholeHogSports.com. And when we come back, Matt Jones will join us on the phone to talk a little bit of Arkansas baseball after last night's win over Pine Bluff and then this weekend's series against Texas A&M.
At Kindle King, we're proud of over 4 decades of design. We're continuing the legacy of great creative design by combining our brands of Kindle King, Soapbox, and Shopcart. Together, these brands represent a new focus in marketing design with individual attention to specific areas. Through our design expertise supported by a team of talented professionals, we showcase our best. We are Kindle King, we are Soapbox, we are Shop Cart, we are Design.
Welcome back. We're joined now on the phone by Matt Jones, your usual host. He'll be back tomorrow, but he joins us to talk a little bit of Razorback baseball. First, I want to tell you about our friends at Bentonville Glass. They've been serving their community since 1971, and they are committed, professional, and versatile. If you're looking for a quality leader in Northwest Arkansas, and if you're looking for skilled craftsmanship, you can choose Bentonville Glass for all of your glass market needs with the highest quality products. You can visit them at 507 South Main in Bentonville or at bentonvilleglass.com. Matt, thanks so much for calling in. I know you've been on some dad duty today, but you were able to call a Fayetteville Harbor game the other night, a baseball game, with 4 Razorback commits in that game. So what did you see out of that game? I had forgotten that you were doing that and that there were that many future Razorbacks there.
Well, it was kind of cool because both of the pitchers in the game are committed to Arkansas. Luke Cornelison from Springdale Harbor and Mark Brissy at Fayetteville. Brissy is from Batesville, and he transferred to Fayetteville for his senior year. And, I mean, it was kind of a who's who in the ballpark. Matt Hobbs was there. Nate Thompson was there. You had a ton of scouts. And so it didn't matter if it was Brissy or Cornelison pitching. Every pitch, like 10, 15 radar guns went up behind the plate. And so, it was a neat deal watching them. Looked to me like Brissy is probably a little bit more polished, at least on that day. Cornelison struggled a little bit with some walks early in the game, but it's interesting to watch these players and then kind of compare it to what the freshmen will look like when they get to campus in August, September, when we first get a chance to watch them in fall ball. So, assuming that both of them make it to campus, I'm kind of intrigued to see how my thoughts change on them a little bit from seeing him now and seeing him then. Landon Schaefer, who's a shortstop at Fayetteville, he's a big-time prospect. I think Baseball America's got him ranked like in the top 120, 130 of draft prospects this year. His dad is Todd Schaefer, who was on Mike Neighbors' basketball staff for the last 8 years. Really even longer than that. I think he was on the staff, too, up at Washington. But, he's a draft risk, probably one of the highest, if not the highest draft risk in this class for the Razorbacks. So it'll be interesting to see if he makes it to campus. He turned a nice double play the other night, scored a run, had an RBI single. Jason Delmar, who I'm very familiar with because he's been Fayetteville's star football receiver for the last 3 years. He had an RBI single game in that game too. He's an outfielder who's committed to Arkansas. So you don't see a whole lot of talent like that in one high school game. In addition to those players, there's some players who are committed to play at junior colleges, probably some younger players on those teams who are going to get some, D1, D2, JUCO looks later down the road. It was a neat deal. I was talking to somebody, and they said they drove past the ballpark that night, and they couldn't help but notice like how many people were out there watching a baseball game. And it's because there's a lot of talent in it. You don't get that very often in a high school game.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially in Arkansas. Arkansas baseball gets a lot of some solid guys from in-state, and that's something that, I remember talking to Matt Hobbs, or you talking to Matt Hobbs about it, about, kind of what's different about getting some of these in-state guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny you say that because really one of the players that he and I were having that conversation about was Gage Wood, and Gage was actually at the game on Monday too. I believe he and the Brissy, because they're both from Batesville, I believe they know one another. But yeah, I mean, you get a certain want to from them that I don't know that you get from. And it's not to say that players who come from out of state, don't care, because I think they do. But there's just a certain want to from those kids who grow up watching the Razorbacks and want to be Razorbacks. And it's something I've said a lot of times that I think the football program's missing a little bit because they don't recruit the state like the coaches have in the past. And I think that's one of the reasons you see so much turnover on the football roster. I know that doesn't mean anything if they come from the state. I see where this morning the kid from Parkview is entered the transfer portal before he ever played a game for the Razorbacks. So I guess that knife cuts both ways. But yeah, it's you see a certain want to from a lot of the kids who grow up and this is what they always wanted to do.
Well, young guy is the story of the game last night against Pine Bluff. Not an in-state guy, guy from Missouri, but Reese Robinette was the story of that game. 3 doubles kind of helps lift them. It was a run rule win. The level of offense I think we expected against Arkansas Pine Bluff. And for Robinette, I mean, it was really interesting. Just he hadn't had a hit, and it was interesting to talk to him after the game about kind of when he knew he was going to get the opportunity, how he had kind of been frustrated with kind of the lack of success he was having when he did get the chance to come in. He'd been kind of a late game defensive sub a few times, hadn't gotten a ton of plate appearances. I think he had 6, and then finally was able to kind of break through last night. But it was fun to kind of talk to him or hear you guys talk to him last night about making the most of this opportunity.
I love Reese Robinette's story because he came here and, this is his 3rd season here. He hadn't played more than 20 games probably, or, if it's above 20, it's not much above 20. And he stuck with it. And you don't get a lot of guys who do that anymore. They don't get to play and they go somewhere where they can play. And that's not a negative. It's just, it's, if you only got so long to play college baseball. So a lot of players, they make the choice that they're going to go and they're going to play somewhere where they can get on the field. And the fact that he stuck through this for 2 years, knowing full well that he wasn't going to play a whole lot, is really interesting to me because last year he redshirted, and this year before last night, he'd only been mostly a defensive replacement late in games, or maybe they bring him off the bench when a game is out of hand and you want to get your starters off their feet. But I think he's got a real cool story, and so to see him, not only get 3 hits last night, but get 3 doubles. I thought, I haven't seen him use the whole field like he did last night. I think his first double went into center. I think his second went into left center. And then the one that ended up winning the game, I think, was into right center field. So it was a real middle away approach from him, and it's good to see. You always want to have. I don't think it means he's going to play a whole lot moving forward. I think Cam Kozel's their first baseman, but it does give you an idea that, like, hey, if you need that guy, you can go get him. And probably the most famous swing, I guess, is the one that people remember Reese by, is the home run that he had as a pinch hitter down at LSU in 2023 in extra innings that helped them win that game. And it was a game that Paul Skeens started for LSU. Now the home run wasn't against Skeens, but it was a low scoring game, and he comes off the bench. It's a 3-run home run. The floodgates open, and Arkansas wins that opener. So I've always said that what sets Arkansas apart from a lot of other teams is the pieces that it has on the bench. And, he's a piece now. I think that, last night probably opened some eyes, whether it be to the fans, probably a little bit to the coaches, because he performed in a game that way, that, hey, if you need a left-handed bat late in a game, here's an option for you. And I thought it was a really cool story that he got the start and he made a lot of that start. 3 doubles, including a game ender. That was pretty cool to see his teammates run him down in the outfield like that. You can tell that he's a good teammate when they do. You're not always going to get that celebration after a 13-3 run rule win over UAPB. I think that was a reflection that they really love this guy, and it goes back to how cool his story is, that he sticks it out when a lot of other players would leave.
Yeah, I think that's what's most impressive is that so many people in his position have and would leave. And I think it, like to your point about the celebration, it's super fun, and I like that about some of these midweek games. It's fun to kind of get to see different guys get an opportunity, and it was great. Last night was such a good post game interview combination between Reese getting to talk about the opportunity and the success, and then Cam Kozel, who has become easily the most fun player to talk to. He's the most interesting man in Arkansas baseball, and he is such a fun post-game interview. I mean, like, we got a YouTube comment on last night's video of the players that said this was my favorite player interview ever. Just because every time Cam Kozel gets in there, he's really thoughtful and insightful, and he also is funny. So he's cracking jokes, but he's also giving you great insight into his own approach, the team. You talked to him about fishing. We got a Garden of Gethsemane mention that I was not expecting. Like, you just never know where he's gonna go, but it's always to an interesting point, and actually does teach you a little bit about his approach or the team, or you learn something every time you talk to him.
Yeah, he's real charismatic. He's one of the most charismatic baseball players I've seen come through here in a long time. And, uh, I fully expect him to be at Arkansas next year, too. I mean, he's not draft eligible. So it seems like he's found a nice fit here. And I think he's going to be a fan favorite for, a long time to come. And, the thing is that he's been getting into the interview room because he's playing well. I know he didn't have the best weekend down at Georgia last week, but outside of that series, he's been really, really good since SEC play began, and he even had some success in the Georgia series, just not as much as he had in some of the previous ones. And I guess you could say that about a lot of the players in the lineup too. But yeah, he's fun. I like Cam Kozel a lot. And you can tell that he's kind of, I don't know, to me, he kind of feels like the heartbeat of the team right now. Mm-hmm. Like as Cam Kozel goes, and you could probably say that about Davalon too. But really, as Kozel goes, it seems like the team kind of responds to that. And even like last night, they'd really been scuffling for about 3 innings. They had a stretch where they had 10 in a row retired, and then Kahio Aloy gets a little chopper infield single, and then Kozel comes up next at bat and hits a home run, and then floodgates open again. So he's fun. I like him a lot.
Yeah. As far as this weekend series goes, I guess it's weird. It is a weekend series, but 2 of them are technically not on the weekend, I guess, unless you count Friday as a weekend day. I don't know. But we'll see what happens with Saturday as far as if they can get a game in. I keep checking the weather, and it seems like it might be kind of tough. Do you think they would try to play both on Friday if that happens?
Well, it's supposed to be pretty bad Friday night, too.
Oh, really?
I don't think they're going to put a doubleheader on Thursday. I think if they were going to do that, we would have heard that by now. And, you've got SEC Network televising the game Thursday night. I think that adds a little bit of a wrinkle into everything because – you don't want to put a game before a game that's locked into an actual television window. I think that becomes really difficult on a lot of people who are involved. Friday night does not look good. Friday afternoon looks okay, like it's playable. So I wonder if you might see Friday's game time moved up, and then Saturday we'll see what happens. I know it looks like it's going to rain most of the day, but remember that Missouri game a couple of weeks ago on Saturday? I mean, they found a window where they could play for 3 hours in a heavy mist. Dave Van Horn said it was like playing in a cloud. And so, that's how it is all the time up here this time of year. You get a lot of rain, but very rarely does it rain the entire day. And, that field dries really fast. I have faith that they'll be able to find a window to play something and get all 3 of these games in. I think the weather, the Missouri weekend looked a lot more daunting than it does this weekend. And, they were still able to find a way to play all 3 that weekend. I bet they're able to do it.
And the big thing we're tracking with this series is the starting rotation because Van Horn kind of pretty much confirmed that Gabe Geckel will probably not be in there. Wasn't ready to say what they were going to do instead. Said Zach Root will go game 1, game 2 we'll see. I don't know. Do you have an expectation as far as who that's going to be? And is that something we're going to learn today?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, in that we'll learn today. No, I don't have an expectation.
Yeah.
They got so many guys that are versatile who can start, that I could see a few different players being put in there. It was kind of interesting last night that we didn't see Ben Bybee, and I wonder if maybe he's a consideration for game 2 because he's got some SEC weekend experience in his past, his true freshman season. Obviously, he's got a lot of midweek starting experience, and he's been pitching, pretty well in SEC play. I mean, even like at Georgia last week, he gave up the home run, I think, to the first batter he faced, and then he settled in and had 3 pretty good innings before it ended for him. So that wouldn't surprise me. Throw him out there, just say, hey, maybe can you give us 4 innings, and we'll go to the bullpen and figure the rest of this out. Wouldn't surprise me to see a TBA. See what the pitching staff looks like after Thursday night's game. Gage Wood, it looks like he's going to be back this weekend. Do you bring him out in kind of a controlled environment and do what they did with Brady Tigert a couple of years ago and start him and kind of ease him back in, but start him to where he knows that he's going to throw his first pitch at this time, and he knows that he's going to throw this many pitches. So I think there's a number of things they can do. Like I said, they got a lot of versatility. And they got a lot of players who I think are team first guys who don't care if they're starting, they don't care if they're relieving, they don't care if it's middle relief or if they're the closer. They just want to come in and do their job for however many pitches they're asked to throw. So we'll find out this afternoon. I don't know what it's going to look like. Like I said, I kind of have some hunches, but you never know. They keep it pretty close to the vest.
Yeah, they definitely do. Dave does not like to make the announcement in a press conference. He prefers for the release to come out, I think, unless it's just going to be the same.
Part of that, I think part of that, Christina, is that they don't want to give the other team, like an extra amount of time to prepare. They want to release. They want to basically swap starting rotations, kind of like they swap lineup cards at the beginning of a game. So I think there's a little bit of a gamesmanship to that too. Definitely.
And with Texas A&M, I mean, this is a team that started poorly in SEC play, has kind of been putting it together a little bit more the last couple of weeks. And, somebody asked Dave Van Horn last night, is it a good thing that you're getting a team that's gotten a couple of SEC wins now and maybe isn't as hungry? Does it change anything? And he said, even when they were struggling, we weren't ever going to overlook them because we know, they were such a preseason hyped team. There's so much talent on this team. So they were never going to overlook them. So he said it doesn't seem to make that big of a difference. But I do wonder how, from the Texas A&M side of things, they approach this series now that they've gotten some of that SEC success going. They've gotten some wins. They've seen the ball go in, if that makes sense. And now they have a really tough test going to Arkansas.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Texas A&M's a good team. I think they're a dangerous team. And, a lot of it's because they got a lot of those players who who we saw be really good last year. And they haven't played as a team real great until maybe the last couple of weeks. And what's interesting is that all of this started after they got no hit at Tennessee. They got no hit in game 1 at Tennessee. And then they came out the next day, and, I mean, they looked like a totally different team. I think they scored 9 runs in one game and 17 runs in another, and then they won their midweek, and then they swept South Carolina. South Carolina had them on the ropes a couple of different times. Their game 1 against the Gamecocks went into extra innings, and they ended up getting a walk-off hit. I think it was from Caden Sorrell in game 1. They win that one. They blew South Carolina out in game 2, and it looked like South Carolina was going to salvage the series. They were up 10 runs, and A&M got a run to where the run rule wasn't going to be a factor, and then they get it to the 9th inning. They hit 2 grand slams, and they come back and rip South Carolina's heart out. And so they got a really strong lineup. I don't know that their pitching is quite what people thought their pitching would be. This year, one of the coaches they lost to Texas was their pitching coach last year, who I've had people in the industry tell me is one of the very best pitching coaches out there right now. So I think that they probably lost something by, losing, his mentorship, his tutelage, whatever you want to call it, with these pitchers. Like Ryan Prager, he was one of the best pitchers in the conference last year. He went toe-to-toe with Hagen Smith for 6 or 7 innings, and he just hasn't been what he was last year. And I think that that's kind of a story that's repeated a little bit across A&M's lineup. But they're good. They remind me a little bit of Florida last year. And I mean that they've got a good roster. And, if they get into the postseason, I don't think anybody's going to want to see A&M end up in their regional. I know that.
Yeah, definitely. It's been interesting to track some of those teams that were kind of started SEC play poorly and kind of it was kind of all over the place. It felt like those first couple weeks, and I think some of that is the nature of the SEC, and some of that, Texas A&M was the biggest surprise because of all that kind of preseason hype. And Van Horn mentioned yesterday that everybody was saying they had the most talented roster in college baseball, and it reminds me a little bit of Texas A&M football a couple of years ago when they had all the talent and all the money in the world, and then they couldn't really do a lot with it. And a lot remains to be seen baseball wise if that's going to be the case. But like you said, it seems like they're putting it together a little bit more than maybe the A&M football team did a couple years ago. But
the difference with the football team and the baseball team is that the baseball team, last year they were a win away from winning the national championship.
Yeah.
They won game 1 of that championship series against Tennessee, and then lost game 2 and game 3. And I seem to remember both of them being pretty competitive games, and they brought back so many of their top players off of those teams, like Lavalette, who you're going to see this weekend. I mean, he's the most dangerous hitter in the SEC in my book. He is really good. First-round pick this year. Like I said, they got Caden Sorrell, they've got Caden Kent back. I thought that Gavin Grahovac was one of the toughest at bats that I saw last year, and he tore up his shoulder early in the season, their third baseman, and I think that might have affected them a little bit. Just from it's kind of like I'm not saying that this is the reason Arkansas lost the last 2 games last weekend, but kind of a similar deal. When you see Nolan Souza go down like that, it kind of takes a little bit of the spirit, I think, out of the team. And I think you saw that probably with A&M early this season when Grahovac went down, because they didn't play very well at all that weekend. I think they lost their next midweek game. And, so that's a big piece that's missing from their lineup. They lost Shane Sadeo, who's a really good pitcher for them. He had Tommy John surgery back in the fall. So it's not exactly the same roster that everybody thought was going to be back, but there's still enough pieces there from a team that nearly won a championship last year like I said, I think they've got the potential to be really good. They just haven't been really good as a team yet.
Well, Matt, thanks so much for calling in. I know you'll be back here in the host chair tomorrow to talk a little bit more about the series with Game 1 coming up, and we'll be tracking football transfer portal, basketball transfer portal, everything, baseball and softball over at wholehogsports.com. And we hope we'll see our audience again tomorrow on the podcast.